Dare to be awesome, Chris.
Okay.
We're live. And the on-ramp was I think I owe you like, what, $150 for personal therapy?
No, there's these moments, like you and I kind of have these shock and awe moments, I think, of having some common connect. It's not like so let's go this route. Despite the fact I feel like we kind of just jumped headlong into friendship, there's still these moments where, I'll be surprised that we have some common touch points, I think, in our life as far as, how we view self, how we view the world, how we sort of feel the connections with our own siblings and our family. And I think that's what kind of comes out of our on-ramp today, that time spent looking at that. Like I don't examine outwardly how I do with my family and the things that I do with my family, the way that I feel about the history of my own family. I probably do it in more detail with you than I do with most people. So the on-ramp, if that's what it is, if there's a little bit of therapy in it, I'm all good.
Great. So you said it live on air that I don't owe you any money.
Yeah. Yeah. Digital Perfect. Signature on that. Yeah. There's signature,
yeah. We've got video proof, man.
Yeah. It's an OZ trade. What's that? What do you say? It's the trade economy. So
the barter system.
The barter system. So it'll come, and the fact it doesn't stop. It's not like we're going to be. How do we stop it now? Do you know what I mean? Like the train's left the station. There's things that are going to pop up that are curious that you or I or both of us are going to say, hey, what's going on with that thing? That moment that we talked about. Is it any better? Is it any different? So
for sure. So this week, I want to throw this out, a dad thing. So we got the DeCodEd dad school teacher thing going on. Okay.
I was wearing mine this week too, actually.
You're wearing yours?
I was wearing it this week, yeah.
Oh, the dad / teacher. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by DCP.
Yeah, DCP.
It's more than just a podcast, people. Big thumbs up to my wife for making the shirt for me.
I didn't know that. Thank you. I'll pass out the thank you. Actually, I thought you made them.
So my wife, my wife bought the shirt. My wife made the letters, the words, the decal, and then I butchered it when I put it on the shirt. So full disclosure, Chris has one too. He's not wearing it because it's messed up.
No, because it's in the bottom of my laundry. Don't say that. It's in the bottom of my laundry.
So I got instructions from my wife, and like a good husband does, picks and chooses what he wants to hear when they explain it to him. And then I go and I excuse me, and I wreck it. I didn't do it right. So basically we had 2 reject shirts, and when Chris was down and we went on our food extravaganza in Kitchener-Waterloo, I gave him his shirt, and I'm wearing mine today. So anyway, that's the story of the shirt. Okay, so it was an interesting week in terms of being a dad and being a teacher. And so I'm going to throw this one. So I go to work and I do my teaching thing all day. And it was Wednesday. And I get in the car and I'm coming home and there's like a list of things to do. And I was responsible for cooking dinner that night. As I'm turning the corner, like into my neighborhood, the car starts to act funny. Like I can feel like a clunk, 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 clunk. And I'm like, okay, there's something stuck in my tire. So then I finally pull in the driveway, get out, walk around the car to see a nail in my rear tire that no word of a lie is like as thick as my pen.
Ugh.
And it's like, and I can see the back end of the nail. So like there's a whole chunk of nail in the tire and there's a whole chunk of nail out of the tire. And that was the clunk clunk, because every time the tire would turn, it would clunk on the ground, but it wouldn't get pushed in anymore. So I walk in the house, grab the phone, call my father-in-law and say, just like, do I just shove it in the tire to like secure it? Because I know if it comes out, all the air in the tire is leaving. So at the moment, my tire still is full of air. It still works, but the nail's half in. And it's not in the thick rubber part. It's in the tire. It's like the treads right in there. So he's like, he kind of is hemming and hawing, and I'm like, okay, so I shouldn't nail it into the tire. So then I text my wife, and I'm like, I got a tire problem. I'm not cooking dinner. I'm grabbing the youngest, and I'm going to Costco. So Costco is literally 5 minutes away, and that's where I purchased my tires. And I know that there's a warranty, like they'll fix stuff like this for nothing. And hopefully, because I bought the tires there, they'll fix it now because I'm a customer. I'm not just some guy off the street that says, hey, I got a tire problem. I need your help. And that's my only, like, so this is what I'm thinking as a dad. I will not have a vehicle to do what I need to do. I won't be able to get to work. I won't be able to take my family where they need to be. Yada, yada, yada. And it's the only thing on my mind. Text my wife. I say to my son, who's sitting at the laptop eating popcorn, like he's doing his after school thing. And I'm like, dude, grab your popcorn, get in the car. We're going to Costco. And he could tell by the tone of my voice and the look on my face that there was no room for negotiation. It was, we're leaving now. So he gets in the car and he's being cool about it. He's like, so what's up, Dad? I'm like, there's a problem with the tire. This is my only, like, it's 4:30. I can't go anywhere else. It needs to get done now, or else Dad doesn't have a car for a day at least. And that's so that's like, think of that bomb. I'm not going to work. Nothing else matters. That's the problem with me, is that when I get into that focus, nothing else matters. So that's great when I'm vlogging or blogging or doing amazing work in the classroom, but it doesn't work well for anything else, right? Like, so get to Costco, and it seems like the universe all of a sudden was like, okay, just slap me in the face, and now it was gonna caress me and hug me, which, you know, I dislike. So so I get to Costco and I pull right up to the garage bay, and I tell the guy comes out and he's really nice. He's like, hey sir, how can I help you? I'm like, I bought my tires here in October. There's a huge nail in my tire. I need to get it fixed. He goes, no problem. Park your car, go inside, talk to the front desk. I don't know what the schedule is, so I can't help you, but that's like how I can direct you. I'm like, okay. Park the car, go inside. The lady pretends like they're busy. I'm like, you got 3 bay doors open with no cars in them. I need this. Like, you need to do this. And she's just looking at me like, she probably gets that all day, right? Like, you're going to do this now? And I'm like, trust me, in my real life, I'm not that much of a jerk, but right now I'm kind of bothered. So she's like, okay, well, let me go check. So she comes back, she's like, we can take your car. And I'm like, okay. So while she's doing that, my wife texts me, and my wife says, I need to go to Costco and buy stuff anyway. So I'm coming, and we'll do some shopping. And if your car's done before we leave, great. If it's not, we can go home. You can help me unload the groceries. We can eat dinner, and then I can take you back. So at this point, I'm like, okay. Wife comes, we do the shopping. She leaves, the car's done. I come home. Everything worked out this time. But what upsets me, I guess I'm upset because when the dad thing hits, nothing else matters. Like, I need the vehicle. I need it. It gets me to work. It takes my kids where they need to be. And it bothers me that something like that gets in the way of everything else. Like, nothing, I'm telling you, nothing else matters, because if I park the car in the garage and I go inside and I cook and I clean and I work on my AQ course and I think about the next day at work and what I'm going to be doing with my kids and how it's going to work out, then I wake up in the morning and I have a flat tire. Guess what? Nothing's getting done. Nobody's going anywhere because I can't get anywhere. So, like, I know my wife will say, just take it easy. And I'm like, you don't understand. There's a bigger picture for me that if I leave it, and I'm like, oh, everything's okay, I can't be driving on it for a full, like, I could drive to work, but then I come out of work and I've got a flat tire. So I got to, you get what I'm saying? So
I do.
But I don't think other people understand me. I think other people are just like, it's not a big deal. I'm like, it's a big deal because at some point that car is not going to function anymore. And when the car stops functioning, I'm not going to work, or I'm not coming home to make dinner because I'm in the middle of dealing with something that I should have dealt with the day before. So why am I telling this story? I'm telling this story because that's the dad part, the family part, the non-work part that kicks in, and action needs to happen and nothing else matters. And so, when I hear a colleague tell me, so the next day I'm telling people at work and they're not getting it. Like, oh, so you had a nail in your tire. It's a minor inconvenience, isn't it? I'm like, not so minor if I park it in the garage and there's a flat tire in the morning and I'm not here to tell the story. And I have to take an unpaid day from work to get my tire fixed. Like, something's got to give. Because, and here's the other thing. The people who repair those things, they're busy too. They've got a long list of people who want repairs. Even though it's like a 30-minute repair, someone's got to let me in. And I'm at the mercy of, I could change the tire and put on the no good tire in the trunk, but then I got to take the good tire and have somebody repair it. Like, it's layered and you're at somebody else's mercy the entire time. And when those things kick in, not like I said, nothing else matters. And I'm stubborn. So if it was like I had like a major project due for my AQ course, I'm not handing it in, which means I could throw away the whole course over a flat tire. That's how stubborn and dumb I am. And that's just how it's gonna be. So that kicked in this week, and I hate it when that kicks in. And then the shift. So there's the high emotion in my personal life there, and some stuff with my son, which I'm not going to talk about on the podcast. And then the work part kicks in, where I participated in so my head was so full of stuff this week that I was supposed to participate in a Twitter chat on Tuesday night. But because my head was so full of like life, like home life, dad life, that I forgot. And so halfway through the chat, I got a message from the person running the chat saying, hey, just a reminder that this is happening if you're available. And I was very thankful for that, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have remembered. So I jumped into that, which led to a lot of amazing reflection for me. And then I vlogged about it the next day, talking about vulnerability. And where I've landed on vulnerability is I'm ready to be vulnerable at certain times. And so in those times that I'm available, I should dive in head first. And then in the times where I'm not 100% ready to be vulnerable, I'm just going to sit back and think about why I'm not vulnerable and what I can do to lead me to vulnerability in order to be more innovative, more creative, and to impact positive change.
Okay. The dad thing, I get. Totally get that. And I'm laughing as you're telling the story, because I had a similar experience, or a comparable experience. I told you last time we chatted that coming back from our food adventure, I'm like, something's up with the car. I don't know exactly what's going down. But I'm like, okay, maybe it's old. I'm in negotiations on the home front, whether or not we need to replace the vehicle. Next morning, we go to run some errands. So this being the Easter weekend, so we go to run some errands on the Friday. No, it wasn't errands. I think we were just going out. We're just going out. I don't know where we were going. So we get in my car. Well, both of our cars, mine and my wife's, but I tend to drive one more often. She drives the other one. So we get in it and we start to pull the driveway, and there's like a da-dunk coming from the front driver quarter side, somewhere in there. Can't tell where it is. We're like, okay, well, maybe, you get this thing in your head, like, well, maybe it's just going to happen for a few seconds. Maybe it's just like, it's like an old, me getting up in the morning. You got to stretch a little bit, and then okay, the joints are stop snapping and popping. But we drive down the street a little bit, and it's getting worse. We're like, okay, we're not taking this vehicle today. And let's put it back. We're not going to try and take a chance. We're just going to put it back in the driveway, and we're going to go to do the thing that we're going to do. I think we're going to do like a family event. So Good Friday, like our mechanic's not open. We call around, like there's nobody that we can call on Good Friday. So I tried leaving a message. They're not taking messages. It's wise, right? You know, like if you're a busy garage, there's no point in taking messages if you know you're all stocked up the next day. So I get that too. So Saturday morning, I call, and they have no appointments that day for what I'm looking to have done on the fly. They say, you know, we could do kind of like a tire check. We could do something very, very small, but we can't do that particular job. And then my stomach starts to like drop, right? I will say that the moment, so as we pull the car out and it's making just not healthy sounds, when we hopped in the vehicle, in my spouse's vehicle, so she was driving, I'm texting a friend saying, we're down a car. Can I get a ride with you on Monday? And I don't know how this is going to play out. I haven't even been able to get an appointment yet for the vehicle, but I could be in a position where I don't have a vehicle to get to work. And, you know, there was some hang time there. This particular friend is local, but not really quick on texting, which is all good. But it's amazing how anxiety inducing that was. And I tried calling and they weren't picking up their phone. Like that's just kind of how they are with their mobile, right? I guess I could have tried calling their house too. But at that point, I'm like, this is not me to share my stress with them. I've sent the message. I kind of settled into this moment of, I actually don't need them to tell me anything right now, because they're kind of my only hope short of renting a car this weekend. Like that's my option. There is nobody else that kind of drives in that direction to work, the new place of work that I'm at. It is only this person. If they can't deliver, then I'll work on that. But I don't know that they can't deliver yet. Now, bear in mind, this is all within about a 30-minute period, but it feels like a forever. Okay. Still 4 days left of the weekend, but it feels like there's no time left. So it's a weird kind of like mind mess that's going on. So I managed to get an appointment for Monday morning, and in that time I still didn't know. So I text back my friend. They hadn't got back to me yet on my first onslaught of texts. I mean, can you help me out? I said, okay, I do have the car in now, but I still might need a ride. They end up texting back and saying, okay, how are we going to do this then? Can you get up? So it's sort of like they live on the other side of town, and there's no real meeting points between our things. So I would have to find a way to get there, to get closer to that person, to my friend. So then becomes the local negotiation, because the way the mornings work is that I'm up at 5:15 or whatever, kind of get my morning routine done, and then I'm waking the kids up, kissing them goodbye. I'm heading off by 6:30 to work so that I can get ahead of the traffic. So what this sets up now is that in order for me to get a ride with a friend, the whole family is going to have to make some changes, because my kids have to get up a little bit earlier. My spouse would have to get up a little bit earlier. She would have to drive me to this person's house. That person could drop me off at home. So it sets in motion these family change-ups. What I find, what I was laughing to me within your story, which was kind of the biggest, I feel all the feels that you were saying, but the confusion for me was around not the confusion. The biggest challenge for me was around asking for help. And I had it's like, I knew, my friend's name is Tanya. Thank you, Tanya. Props to Tanya. That's my friend that said she would help me out. I don't think she's going to come across this, but maybe it's an Easter egg if she ever does find this. So props to Tanya for saying, yeah, we can make this happen. She also was kind of willing, like, should I come and pick you up, or are you going to be dropped off with me? Very kind, very open. And I appreciated that. I had a hard time appreciating it initially, though, because I was of the mind, like, I should be able to do this myself. I should be able to figure out a solution here myself. And I was even slightly stressed at negotiating locally. So with my own family, saying, okay, sorry that the car is doing what it's doing. Like I should be apologizing on the behalf of a kind of a semi broke down car. The car does as a older model car will do. It's going to break down. It's a machine, right? It's not going to run flawlessly. I had a real hard time not personalizing that and making it about me, which I think was my big issue in this, is that I got swept up in somehow I'm the only one that can fix this. And even though the family negotiations were just matter of fact, like, this is how we're going to have to shift this. Yes, it's going to cause some inconvenience, but we have to go there. I was feeling a lot of guilt around asking for help outside of the family. And in the end, it worked out. It worked out. They got it fixed. Now they ended up finding another problem. I had to go back the next day, and I think I told you some of the dollar value in that. It ended up costing me like a couple grand to get this thing fixed. I'm like, what? But there was a humbling moment in this, and that part of what was making this a problem was me, and I had to, after the fact, really kind of dress myself down for it, because the true impact, the true stress impact on this moment, in reflection, I think it was a little bit of my own sort of man box, like thinking like I should be able to fix this thing. It was also me hanging on to a schedule that it was changing around me, and I just was not changing with it. Like I was desperately like, no, my morning has to go this way. The morning has to go this way, that I wasn't seeing other options. And it was difficult for me to sort of, I think it was two sides of the same coin. Admit that things were changing, and admit that I couldn't dance with it. Like I couldn't make it happen myself. But yeah, we've talked about the morning routine. Like we have a whole bunch of templates from, listening to, what's that cough? That cough sounds different than the other two, oh, someone was playing with the dome light in the car. How do I get it charged up in the morning? Hope it's not the alternator. Like there's so many variations on that morning routine, and making it okay and making it work. Here's the thing. Are you more stressed? What stresses you more? Sudden things, like say the morning of work, figuring it out, or the ones where you have to stew in it? Because I would argue both of us had the time to fix this. Both of us, I could have parked the truck in the driveway and not driven it for the weekend, and then Monday morning got into it because we would drive just Karen's car the whole time. Which one causes you more? I'll do this a different one. Where do you feel more capable in your dad kind of superhero toolbox for fixing the sudden, it's hitting the fan and we're going to figure it out, or where you actually see it coming at a distance? You're like, I got the time to do this, but it's like, damn, like that's going to be tough. Which one do you feel, I don't know, I could say more healthy and trying to mentally well fixing, or the one that causes you more anxiety? You can answer that however you want. So dad style, which one gets at you more?
That's a great question. I think, I think the last minute issue is more, there's less thinking involved. Like if I wake up and I go and the tire's flat, I'm not going to work. Like there's no question what's happening. I'm not going to work. It's not happening. I can't drive my kids to school, and I'm not going to work. So in that way, I guess I need to make some phone calls and say I'm not coming in. And that's why we talked about my emergency plans at work. Mm-hmm. Every night when I leave work, I close my day book, put it aside, and put out emergency plans, because my life as a father means that there are going to be some days where I'm not going to be able to plan, half an hour before I'm supposed to not be at school. Like it's not going to work. So they're just there. So if I can't be there, there's something there. I think it'll come time to fix it, right? Like when I found out there was an issue with my tire, I had a window of time to repair this. And I was upset because I only had a little window of time, which means nothing else is going to get done until that window closes. at least in the morning, you see it and you're like, yeah, well, that's there. So I guess I'm not going to work. And my kids could walk to school. They might be late, so I might have to call the school. But again, that's not on my mind. That's not what I don't care if they're late. And I'll call when I call. Like, you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. See, this is the kind of the blind spot in this that I think I was playing with, is that I couldn't access those resources. I couldn't access. My kids could walk to school too. My spouse could get up early. Like, the actual fix to this was so elegant and simple. Just drive me to somebody else's house. Yes, it time shifts things by kind of 30 minutes in the morning. Like, we'll have to get up to make it work. But that's all it was. And it was just amazing. I could not access that thinking. I don't know why. I was so resistant to admitting that the fix was that simple and that accessible. Damn, like, it was just, I think about it afterwards, like the stress I put myself under. And not only that, even while it's being fixed, I got swept up in the whole, but it's not being fixed fast enough. And the what if they find something else? What if they actually find something else? And I think to myself, oh, great. Now I'm going to have to deal with that, which is a complete falsehood. It's my family. It's my other resources that can help me deal with that.
The what if is horrible, right? Like the what if they find something else? That's horrible. And especially in my case, like, I wasn't at a mechanic shop. I was at a tire place.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, by the way, your such and such is broken or out of place. And we don't do that here, right? Like, we don't fix those things here. We just do tires. Great. Great. Anyway, so, like, you can't ignore those parts of your life. They just come into play. And in a way it sucks, but in a way it's life. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. You got to deal with it, unfortunately, whether you want to or not.
But I think I'm sort of just going to land on I'm going to take it as a life lesson. And I was reading something that talks about not only life lessons, but the whole life lies. That sorry, I don't know if your turn of your head was for me or something on the.
What's a life lie?
Well, one of those moments, like, I actually was solo in figuring that out. Because then I have to kind of flip that and say, don't ever do that again. I did not like how I felt. I did not like how stress gave me permission to be, kind of a negative person around my family and other people. The upswing to this was that the truth in it was that it sort of got me thinking about, who do I have in my world in addition to my family to help work this out? And sort of seeing a friend in that space. So yeah, I think that there's the life lie in this would be that I am the only person that can fix my problems. Or sorry, I am my only resource to fix my problems. So that's what I was saying.
I would love to hear your thoughts on vulnerability and that whole perspective. And the reason why I would like to hear about it is, when we were talking about this Brene Brown Netflix documentary,
mm-hmm.
Her whole shtick is vulnerability and how to become more vulnerable, and that it leads to, like, good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard, man. Like, it's hard because there's a number of layers that you don't want to touch. Like, for example, I can be vulnerable talking on this podcast right now with you, but I may not want to expose what I'm talking about here with certain people outside of this circle. So like, I'm not going to be in a staff meeting. I'm not gonna raise my hand and say, oh, by the way, my buddy and I, we were talking about this on our podcast, which you can find on YouTube, episode whatever. Like, I'm not gonna do that. So I'm not prepared to be vulnerable that way, but I am prepared to be vulnerable sitting here talking to you about vulnerability and about like the layers that go with what affects whether I'm going to expose myself and be vulnerable or keep myself closed and not chase that whatever's on the other side of the vulnerability. I think I'd like to discuss that more, whether it's with you or anybody else. I want to talk about those layers. And I think selfishly, it's because when I expose those layers and I become aware, I feel powerful. Like, I feel like I'm in control. So I guess at the end of the day, I like to feel like I'm in control of my situation, which isn't always the case. But I think that we can talk about vulnerability and we can talk about, it's going to do good things for you. But I think some people are like me and they need to hear about the layers. Like, they need to know, they need to feel, they need to hear. Being vulnerable means you really have to be okay. Maybe you don't. For me, I really have to be okay with what I'm doing in the realm of being vulnerable. So when I did a short, like less than 5-minute vlog about the Twitter chat and being vulnerable, and then I pushed it out to our YouTube channel, and then I pushed it out on Twitter. So the scariest part of all that was pushing it out on Twitter. I felt no fear sitting in front of the camera talking about it. I felt no fear publishing it to YouTube. Where I felt weird was when I push it out to a particular group of people, but that it's out there. It's just out there now. Why was I still able to do that even though I felt the fear? It's because I was comfortable with what I was doing, which can be a little bit confusing to me, that I'm sitting there scared, but I understand why I'm scared, and I'm still going to push it out knowing I'm scared. But I didn't let that fear overcome me so much that I wasn't going to provide what I created to a couple of people who helped me with my thinking the night before, and I wanted to give back my way.
I saw those prompts popping up about the discussion. Tina Zita and Jen Apgar, I think, were some of the kind of the vanguards of that, sort of saying we're going to do the chat. There was a long lead up to it, because when it popped up, when Brené's talk popped up on Netflix, there's a whole lot of buzz, a whole lot of cheering. There was a lot of people pretty happy with the fact that she's stepping into the kind of the video realm. And I've watched some of it. I haven't watched the whole thing all the way through, and it rings quite synergistically with anything that I've read. I've read her Dare to Lead book and an older one of her first ones. I can't think of what the name is. I'll find it afterwards, but I read an older one. And I followed her, and I've seen her TED Talk and other bits and pieces. So I was aware of that kind of popping up. I was considering connecting with it. It's interesting. Part of what kept me from going there is that I really do not. I've lost my. I'm trying to find the right word. It's kind of appreciation. Twitter chats do not light me up. They just do not. At one time, I think that they worked for me. I I kind of picked up the fluency, and I figured out, okay, here's the, the Q&A. I found that it didn't, it just didn't fire up my learning. I felt like it was all for me. It was like just snapshot after snapshot after snapshot with no through line. So being able to track my own thinking for me, so for me, I guess what it comes down to is that I appreciate more when I can track my thinking against a conversation as opposed to that kind of snapshot, go back and see what's this string saying. Oh, the string just got split. The conversation went in a different direction. Like it just didn't. I don't take as much. I don't take as much nutrients from a Twitter chat as I do like something that you and I are doing right now, or even if it's sort of like a couple people in the room having a discussion. So that primarily is why I stayed away from that. I think the second part is that I'm finding more in this kind of, I guess it's kind of an overarching sense that I have of Twitter, is the declarative nature of it doesn't get me under the thinking that I'm looking for. So the whole, and maybe it comes back to the conversation as well. I feel limited in how I can actually pursue points of interest that really, really light me up. I find more recently, this past week, I had a whole kind of like thought experiment about why it is that my habit of scrolling. So using that whole concept of scrolling in relation to socials, and just that idea of what am I looking for? Why am I looking for it? And what will I do when I find it? So as I'm scrolling through, trying to sort of think purposefully around what actually catches my attention and what holds my attention. And part of the discussion around vulnerability right now is that I haven't found the thing that holds my attention, I think because it's happening within EDU. I think that's kind of what's happening for me. Talking about vulnerability within the framework of EDU makes it seem like it's not pushing hard enough into what Brené is talking about. And I don't have a better way to shape that other than the silo effect of talking about vulnerability within, let's say, a Twitter chat, is that there's rules of engagement in that fluency that it's just not going to push into the spaces where you can really tap into fear. You can tap into kind of self-assessment. You can tap into, not that they should. I'm saying I think the actual format keeps it rather neutralized. So again, it becomes declarative as opposed to really explorative and kind of rhetorical and not really knowing what to say next. The conversation sometimes just some of the emotionality is kind of stripped from it. And if there's the one thing that I work through myself when it comes to vulnerability, is sort of recognizing the emotional state that's associated with it. So to have a conversation about vulnerability inside of a frame that doesn't allow for true vulnerability, in my opinion, is a difficult thing for me to swallow. The near equivalent in some ways is I think about how when, kids using Facebook, we could use Twitter as well, but kids using Facebook and then schools discussing using Facebook because that's where the kids are as a learning tool or a school management system. LMS, is that learning management system? And then the kids kind of go, well, we're not going to be there anymore because you've just made it uncool. We may pivot to some other tool now if you think that we're going to use the thing that we love or that we're passionate about for learning. And it's not to say that the discussions around vulnerability and the discussions within the Twitter chat are entirely valuable. They are valued to me as well in the broader sense of discussing vulnerability. But I think for me and my learning is I need to get closer to the personal stories. I need to do what you and I just did this morning, talking about how that rattles us as a dad when we can't perform according to our template of what a dad should be able to do. when we can't deliver, here's the kind of twist, either what we perceive to be expected of us or what we perceive ourselves to be able to do, and the anxiety that comes out of that. Like I think that's a good starting point to getting used to talking about vulnerability. And maybe for guys, this is the way to come at it in a kind of factor way, like kind of in a concrete way, as in when I make a choice to say that only I can do it, then I'm making a choice to protect myself from what I can't do. And I love and again, I love the fact that in some ways I'm surprised. I love the fact that it's kind of taken a while, I think, for Brene to kind of penetrate the general EDU thinking. I know of individuals in my PLN that have been like, they've been loving Brene forever and push those pieces out quite frequently. And I noticed, I think it was, maybe, I don't know if it was her, but I follow her as well on Insta. And I think she was pushing out posts. I don't know if it was her, if someone created the sort of like the Insta poetry kind of pieces, like a backdrop, a quote, Brene Brown. I don't know if people were manufacturing that or if it was her, but I think maybe she was pushing out some stuff that she was connecting to EDU. Somebody was. They were taking the pieces and sort of commenting on EDU. I would agree with you that sort of the when you sort of get to become aware that you're not invulnerable is kind of, I guess, part of the first step. And I think there's often quite a distance, and I don't know what pieces exist in between there, because the injury, either let's say to ego or to your sense of self, when you realize you can't do something or you're keeping someone from doing something, I think there's a whole lot of steps straight up for some people then to sort of admit that I am vulnerable, and to choose that mode to then sort of express need, I find is the hardest thing for me as a man, as a father, as a teacher. I don't naturally think that way. And the last piece I'll put to that is I know the source of that thinking, when I think back on the socialized agency of it, as in where, kind of like the source material, there's a large parts of it that I learned from my mom. The sort of like the fact that it's up to me. I got to do it. If I don't do it, then there's something wrong with me. I don't include, like, I have that element of my mom of taking on the responsibility and duty factor, and the problem then being keeping the keep away game that I play. Even sometimes to the point where I'll obscure that I'm not being as successful as I think other people think I should be. I don't necessarily expose, my weak side layup that I can't do it. I'll kind of cover it up in a way that it looks like it was other circumstances that kept me from hitting the basket from that side. And part of that, again, is kind of, it comes back to my perception of expectations, and sort of outward in and me inward out. Thanks for that question. There's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of stuff there to talk about. I would love to have a real-time conversation with people.
I wouldn't.
And that's the you and me part of this, right?
Yeah.
Yet we land here. And the one last thing was, I just had to comment, where you started your thing, you said, and it wraps around perfectly to what you just said now. The messiness of this, in some ways, is you saying on the front end, talking about things here in this medium, and somehow, just life stuff, dad stuff, teaching stuff. And I almost had the sense like you were saying to talk about it here is somehow more private than talking about it at a round table with more people. Like there's something about this medium that kind of allows us to explore stuff that from your POV, you might not necessarily talk about at a staff room table. Yet in some ways, this talk is openly available to anyone that wants to grab it after the fact, right?
It's weird, but this is the cool thing I think about where we're living, the time and the space of where we find ourselves existing, because there's again more layers. I'm choosing to be vulnerable here, even though it's available for anybody to see. I expect you to push back. So am I looking and I talked about this in one of the tweets, am I looking for you to pad my ego, or am I looking for you to push back and get me thinking? I'm not here talking to you to pad my ego. I don't need you to acknowledge what I'm doing or what I've done and how great it is or how whatever. What I need is to engage in a discussion that'll help me ultimately with my reflection and who I want to be and what I want to do. And there's a big difference there. So I'm talking to you using this mode, this medium, about this topic, not looking for acknowledgement, not looking for you to stroke my ego, but looking for pushback, whether it's good or bad. I mean, it can be good pushback, can be bad pushback, whatever. And that Twitter chat, I had no problem. The whole time I was tweeting, I was tweeting with Jen and Tina in mind. So meaning, like for me, they made the chat. Because I hear what you're saying. Sometimes you can engage in something like that and you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know who's running the thing. Like, you know the name, but you don't know anything, right? Like, but here I felt like there was a connection to two people that I have a respect for. Never met either one of them, but based on like their digital footprint and what I'm seeing them push out on Twitter for people to see, like it works for me. I'm in line with their process and their operation. Whether I agree with what they're saying or not, I still have a respect. So I'm willing to go into that and be part of that. So that's the first thing there. The second thing was I actually felt strongly about what Brene Brown was saying. Like and as I said in a tweet, it resonated with me. I was able to triangulate what she was saying with things that I've read and watched with like Gary Vaynerchuk and David Goggins. And if you look at these three people, they're completely three different people from three different worlds, right? Like educator, academic, entrepreneur, businessman, military soldier, retired ultra marathon runner. Like you've got three people like in completely opposite places, yet their message, the core of their message and things I've heard them say all come together to one point, and that's me. What I'm talking to you about, I'm not going to talk about at a staff meeting. Either I'm not ready for that, I have no interest in that, I don't trust the people I'm sitting with, and my ego doesn't want to go there. Here, I don't mind. None of that stuff matters here. And the other thing is, here's another layer that I'm working through with my kids.
Your own kids or school kids?
No, my own kids. And with my school kids, but more focused on my children, my biological children. When I look at Brene Brown, when I look at Gary Vaynerchuk, when I look at David Goggins, here you have three examples of people who are vulnerable. They have exposed themselves, and who knows how much of it is accurate. I don't know. But when you hear the stories, you hear their stories and you think, okay, if this person's making that story up to demonstrate that they're showing vulnerability, then they're sick. Because people don't walk around doing that, right? You don't tell your stories about your biggest failures and your family life that wasn't so great.
to
build your brand? If you do,
despite the fact we know that does happen, I think we admit that does happen when you get into the space of branding, and when you go that one step beyond self-aware, and you go into that full-on self-promotion. There are some people that will jump from right over self-aware, and they'll start to market something that they actually haven't lived as deeply or haven't sort of experienced quite as deeply, and then they go the book deal. I think it's important to sort of recognize there are people out there pushing that type of content, and the only reason I paused you here is that one of the things that fascinates me in the process with Brené is people's willingness to believe in her authenticity. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. You sort of drop Brené Brown into a conversation, and wherever the space is, if someone is aware of the work, they're kind of on board. I haven't heard too much pushback yet for what she's saying. So there's an authenticity factor where she's rocking it. But I think that, I don't know if it's a different conversation. I'm not looking to tip the apple cart on this one, but there are individuals that are pushing, that they're jumping over the self-awareness and going right into this kind of promoted sense of self and then selling the book based on it. When I jumped into your convo at some point, I don't know if it was in that chat or if it was, maybe I was there for like one thing, and I talked about, that round table talk between Gary Vee, Goggins, and Brené, like what that would look like as far as sharing the comics. I don't know, maybe Joe Rogan needs to do a podcast and kind of bring them all to the table and talk about what, not a harmonized, but how vulnerability can look in different perspectives. That'd be pretty powerful. I love too that someone asked you about, can you send me some links to their literature, who they've written, like the writing part, I think from Goggins, and I'll assume Gary Vee, because I think it was tied together. And that made me think about, as far as those two go, for me, Gary Vee and Goggins, it is more about what they've publicized. It's their public presence that makes them interesting to me. I wouldn't necessarily read either one of their books. There's something about how they present themselves and the energy of their conversation. And I kind of do, it's like I'm almost choosing to, sure, I could read a book about them, but I find where I gain the text-based version of all three of those individuals, including Brené, is actually not as powerful to me as the watching them in action version of those people, listening to their talks, listening to the way that they sort of connect with their community. And I apologize for jumping in on that one, but it struck me that people are really on board with Brené, really on board.
I know. So what works for me with her is what she studied and the way she's talking about what she's learned from her studies.
I hadn't even thought of that connection, the sociology side.
Oh, well, what she's talking about is 100%. If you look at me, it's hard for me to be vulnerable. So for me to hear someone talk about the fact that they've researched vulnerability and shame and they've learned something about it, and now sharing some of that, that's huge. That's freaking huge to me. Who's not experienced shame? Right? Like in the on-ramp, you and I talked about something that I'm shameful of. And when I was telling you about it, it wasn't, again, I wasn't looking for anything. I was just ready to express it in the context that it was in. Do I want to sit down with you over coffee and talk about it for an hour? No. But, am I hiding it? No. It's just, there's context, right? Like things will come out in certain contexts. And her message is not to walk around telling everybody about your shameful experiences and not wanting to be vulnerable for whatever reason. It's a call to action. And that's how I'm taking it. There are certain things I want to do in my life, and it's going to involve me having to expose certain parts of me to whoever's looking at the time. That's all it means. And I just need to be ready. And what I mean by ready is I just need to be able to be good with it. Mm-hmm. And once I'm good with it, it doesn't matter what people say about it. It doesn't matter. Do you know how many times this is good training? So my wife and I will be talking about, I'll give you a good example. At work yesterday, I disclosed something to my boss Then I was telling my wife that I disclosed this information to my boss, and she looked at me like, "Are you crazy? You told him that?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "Why would you tell him that? What if he's this or that?" Like the what ifs, right? And I said, it's very simple for me. At the moment in time, in the context that we were in the history that I have with my boss, I felt comfortable saying what I said. And I felt okay with him taking it whatever way he'd like to take it. And it's that simple. She's looking at me like, "You're crazy." And I'm looking at her like, "It sounds crazy because you weren't there for the context. Maybe you don't understand the layers of the history between the two of us. But at the time, it worked, and I'm still, even as I talk to my wife about it, I'm okay with what I said and how I said it." And for me, that is like, it's the best feeling in the world, knowing that you put yourself out there. People might not like it, people might like it, but none of it really matters. The only thing that matters is that you're good with where you are. And that's it for me. Like it's taken like 42 years to discover that. And I'm sure in the 43rd year I'll learn something that I didn't know in the previous 42. That's where I'm at. That's where I have to be, because I'm making decisions that impact kids every day. Like, I work with them, so I have to think before I act. And what can I teach my students, and what can I teach my children at home? So when I was going back to trying to connect the shame vulnerability thing back to my kids, my youngest just experienced something that could cause him to feel shame for the rest of his life in a way. And my message to my son is, you don't need to wait to be 42 and have accomplished certain things that make you feel good about yourself and your life to move past an experience that could cause you shame. You need to be good with where you are and what you did. And as long as you can do that, and you can keep that focus and remind yourself that, the inner talk around, you did everything you could do, there's nothing more you could do, you gave it your all, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You have to actually tell yourself that, because there's going to be voices and noise all around you telling you to feel shame. And I found that too. When you turn on what I call the world mic, the world microphone, and you listen in on all the conversations happening around you, there are people that are constantly telling you to be ashamed of certain things. For example, my wife tried it last night, and she wasn't doing it purposely, but she was trying to tell me, you should feel shame of what you said to your boss. You should feel regret for what you said. No, I shouldn't. Because that's the outside mic voice. It's not my voice. My voice is telling me, oh, it's all good. I'm trying to teach my kids, the ones I live with, the ones that are mine, to try to turn down the volume on that. You don't want to hear those things. You want to hear yourself. And if you feel good about what you're doing, then you want to keep talking to yourself, because if you don't, you're going to hear the voices from the outside, and they're going to drive you in a whole different world, right? They're going to drive you, if you let them do what they want to do, they're going to drive you in a corner, because they don't want you to succeed, because they want to succeed. So Brené's thing is powerful to me, and it's not the books. I've not read her books. I mean, I've skimmed through, and I've tried reading Gary Vee's books, and they don't work for me. And I'm still reading Goggins' book. It's a slow release, because I do enjoy his message. There are parts of his life that resonate with me. So I don't want it to go away. So I've slowly been reading parts of his book. When I feel I need an injection, I crack the book open and I keep reading. And I'm not a big reader, like of books, published books. I'm not a big reader of them. So for me to have tried with certain people is a big deal. It means that I was willing to invest the time. And it's their message, and I'm able to take their message and twist it to my world. It applies. But I know I'm good. Like, I'm going to be vulnerable when I want to be vulnerable, because I'm good with it. And other times I don't want to be vulnerable. right? So there are people that I think they would die to know that I record a podcast with you and it's live on YouTube and it's there to live. They would be like, he does what? Because they don't see a part of me. I don't want to show them that part. I'm not interested. I'm not purposely hiding it, but I'm not advertising it either. And now I'm learning how to not judge them based on how they are when I'm around them, because I don't know what they're like when I'm not around them. It's really, it's the more I think about it, the more I get into it, the more I see that my past experiences, everybody's past experiences are constantly building on them, right? It's that foundation. And I look at someone like Brene and I think, would I think differently of her message if she was not an academic who had published books and who had done certain things to build who she is today? Would I still listen to her? I would hope so. I mean, I listened to a 10-year-old talk to me about his experience being a refugee, and that's impacted my life. Right? Like when I start to think about who do I listen to and why do I listen to them, I was thinking about my student that came from Syria years ago that I taught in grade 4 and in grade 5. I listened to him and he was just a kid, and what he gave me, I don't think he'll never ever know what he's given me, because what he gave me was the key to open the door to looking into myself, who I am, where I've come from, the shame I felt of being the kid that came from a particular place. A 10-year-old did that to me. So, my eyes are open. I'm constantly looking and listening to the messages, because I don't think it matters who's delivering it. I think whatever the message is, if it resonates with you, then you need to do your best to figure out why it resonates with you and what you can do with that feeling to propel you. Because if you're not moving forward and you're sitting still, it gets old fast, and then your self-talk might become negative. And so, you got to do one for the other to work. And I'm in that place. I was thinking about that last night. A 10-year-old has influenced me and helped propel me moving forward in a way that a lot of people my age have not been able to do. Now there are some factors there that are important. Like the minute I met that child, he reminded me of me when I was that age, right? So there were connections, same cultural background, seeing and hearing his stories, like seeing him eating his ethnic food and listening to him talk about his mom making it. Like there were lots of things that just came together. But hearing how he came from war to peace, I don't have that. I've always lived here in this beautiful country, Canada, where there's been peace, where you can speak your mind, you can be free to be who you want to be, who you are. 10 years old. And it's kind of cool because I knew you back then. So you've seen me journey with the reflections that have come from working with that student. Has that ever happened with any other student? No. The only other student that has impacted me as much as he has is the grade 2 student that led me to consider three-dimensional printing and how it can help students learn. That was huge. That came from a grade 2 student. So isn't it interesting that of all the colleagues I've worked with, the principals, the superintendents, the directors that I've gotten to sit down and listen to and talk with, they've given me some good stuff, don't get me wrong, but it was a grade 2 student that helped propel me professionally to do what I want to do to help my kids learn. And it was a grade 4 student who's propelled me to basically rearrange the insides of me and to consider my life in a different way, to stop looking at my way of being as like to look at others and to see maybe what privilege has come to them rather than look at myself and my deficits. So it's just a different framework. And that's not to say that, I wonder why you're successful because of privileges you may have. It's privilege with a capital P. Like, instead of looking at a situation where something negative happens to me as a deficit on my part, I could see why someone else may have had some privilege in that situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've been given something that I've not been given, but the focus is stop focusing on what you can't do and focus on what they did well. And then how can I become that good, right? So it's a shift. And when I say it initially, I know people think, wow, Roland walks around with a chip on his shoulder thinking everybody's more privileged than him. That's not, I guess this is where you get to hear about my thinking about it, because I've not blogged about it. Here I am talking about it. It's not about Chris is white, so he's privileged, and I'm a minority, so I see deficits in me. It's more like, look at your situation. You see somebody doing something awesome that you want to be part of. So instead of thinking, oh, and saying to yourself, I suck, I'll never be that good, flip the switch and stop looking at the deficits and look at the privilege. What is that person doing to put themselves in a position to succeed and to gain knowledge and understanding and skills that I want? And then watch it, live it, work it. I have another example that I feel is really cool right now, and it comes from Instagram. On Instagram, I follow the Canadian Prime Minister's photographer. And lately, he's been on his Instagram stories, he's been tagging the Canadian Prime Minister's videographer. And as you know, I'm interested in videography in a way. And from that, I sent his videographer a couple of messages, just like, what tools do you use? Do you do your job? And a couple of like questions that were kind of specific about video. And he responded, and he was like more than happy to respond, and kind of ended with, if you have any more questions, just feel free to shoot them my way. That's a good example of, oh my God, look at this guy. He's doing video work, and he's doing it like at this high level for this very important person who, like, this guy's videos are the ones that are pushed out to the public to see what the Prime Minister's up to and whatever. Like, it's his work that people see. So instead of saying like, oh, my stuff sucks compared to what he's doing, which is really easy to do for anybody, it's, you know what? I saw a couple of his videos and I really liked them. And so I wonder, what kind of equipment does he use to get those shots? What kind of microphone does he use on his camera? Because the sound is really good. So is he using something really high end or something average and he just knows how to tweak it? Like, these are the questions. So instead of saying, I really suck at what I do, it's, I really like what he's doing. And so I'm going to ask some questions, or I'm going to do some reading, or I'm going to watch something to help me figure out what he's doing. And then how can I apply that to what I'm doing so I can get better in what I'm doing? And what we're doing is two completely different things. I use my video to help my kids with their learning, to showcase some of what they're doing. He's on an international stage doing something in politics, completely different, and yet there's still that common thread. And for me, it's the bottom line, deficits versus privilege. And for me, I examine that, and it helps me move forward, or at least I think it does. So I just think context is important. Context is very important, because what I tell you might mean nothing compared to what I've experienced, right? But I'm, like I said, my ears are open, my eyes are open. If I'm willing to learn from children, and I don't think I've ever not been willing to learn from children, but I just think that, I don't know how many years it's been, but holy cow, like, that grade 2 student impacted my life greatly. It was a turning point. And then the grade 4 student has allowed me to like look at myself and examine who I am as a human. 2 huge gifts that came from people that I worked with. And it wasn't colleagues. It wasn't people with wisdom, so to speak, with their age. It was kids who were just like, who had lived experiences that I didn't have, or who came at things from a different perspective. So, like now it changes everything when I talk like this and think like this, because then I wonder, does it change my philosophy on education? Does it change my position on, like passion and purpose? Because I talked about passion and purpose a couple of years ago. Has my passion and purpose changed? I think it's gotten deeper. Like, I think now when I work with my students, I see them differently. And I'm in a school now where the majority of my kids have come from a harsher upbringing than I could ever imagine, having moved from one country to another country to another country, and then end up in Canada. And I get to work with them. So for me, it's like a gold mine. I'm stuck in a gold mine right now, trying to learn about these people and trying to take what they have and, what can I offer them? Because they can offer me a lot. Sometimes I think they give me more than I give them. That's scary because I'm a teacher, so I'm supposed to be giving them a lot of stuff. And I think I am, but their lived experiences is wild. I'm going to say one more thing, and then you need to talk, because I've been talking for a long time. I'm done being vulnerable. Yesterday morning, so every morning I do my yard supervision is at the front of the school. I'm in charge of letting the buses in and keeping all the other cars out of the parking lot. And a bus pulled in, and every morning is the same. I always wave to the kids as the bus is pulling in. And I try to zoom in on one kid. Like, so every day I try to look at a different kid and wave and show them that I'm like, hey, welcome back to school. And I'm like looking at them. And yesterday, one of the buses, it was an intermediate student sitting at the back of the bus. And I waved and I smiled and I pointed at her to be like, I'm looking at you, I'm saying hello to you this morning. And then at lunch, it was that student that delivered the pizza to my room. So the student walks in and I'm like, hey, it's good to see you. Thanks for bringing the pizza. And she says to me, do you remember me? I said, yeah, of course I remember you. She puts the pizza down and she goes, do you remember me from Mount Mary? And that was the grade 8 retreat that I went on with the grade 8s. And I said, no. I remember you from this morning. Like, yeah, I remember you from there. But I looked at you this morning and I waved to you. I remember that. And then she gave me this look. She was like happy. And I was like, why are you so happy? All I did was wave and smile at you. That's what I remember. I remember like months ago when we went on a retreat, but you should have seen the look on her face when I said, no, today. I looked at you today and I waved at you today and I said hello to you today. And now you're delivering my pizza and I'm saying hello to you again. And I'm thanking you for what you're doing. And she was just beaming. I was like, is that where we're at? Is that where we're at? I don't know. But that's where I want to end with my talk today.
In my in listening through that, you had me thinking about, and kind of sparked me to think about the connection between being vulnerable and then noticing, honoring, dignifying, appreciating vulnerability in others, and what's the kind of connective tissue there. So, and I haven't landed in anywhere, but I guess that's the sort of the tension point that, that I'll carry from our conversation today. And I also, again, not sort of, we don't have to look away from Brene yet, but I look at on the on-ramp, we talked about when sort of sometimes big conversations happen, it creates this bit of a vacuum space. And, when that conversation ends, that space can still be there, and other things can fill that space. So, I think about my own children when they're asking for some new toy that they want. and they kind of say, oh, you know, I really want the Nintendo Switch. And then it creates this great big space in the conversation. I'm like, well, we don't, you know, we're not getting the Switch. There isn't the money, da, 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 da. And then they'll come back and say, okay, can I get a new Lego then? So they kind of like push in the other request inside that sort of cavern of expansion that's been created. And I think about Brene right now. She's taking up a lot of space. She's taking up a lot of space right now in our thinking, in our conversations about, I think, the work that we have to do as humans. And it's slowly percolating, I think, into discussions in EDU. And what I'm really curious to see is when that makes it in, what will be the other resources that will be connected to her? And are there other people like her creating the space to bring to light other people that are doing this type of work, maybe already in our school boards, or you know, locally Canadian versions? Is there a Canadian that an Ontarian that's doing similar work that hopefully at some point by Brene starting this conversation and carrying the conversation and nurturing the conversation around vulnerability and bravery, will we be able to kind of go locavore on it and connect with other people when the stuff starts like, well, if you really dig Brene Brown and the work she's doing, have you heard of this person? So that's what I'm wondering for the next steps in the vulnerability discussion, how it manifests kind of at ground level in our schools and with our colleagues across a table, not just digitally.
It's good stuff, man.
I think so. The good, messy stuff, right? The good, messy stuff.
So last week we didn't get to do our regular thing. Bless you.
Thank you.
We did our MAD PD presentation, and we're even lucky we got to do it because your tech just was not interested in working last week. So I'm glad that we're up and running this week, and I'm glad that we got to talk about reflective practice last week.
Yep. And props to Pete Cameron and Derek Rodenizer for facilitating that event again this year, and all the other presenters that are now connected with the International Unconference of MAD PD.
I was just about to say something about it being international, the fact that there are people from all over the place who have participated. It's kind of cool. It's cool to think of, but it's internet, right? Like you're on the internet, and the internet's accessible almost everywhere, almost.
We don't often create the borders, right? Like that's the bridge over the troubled waters, the internet.
I love it when I discover, for example, like new followers on Twitter that are in the UK and stuff, and in Australia. It's so cool to see and to be part of a group of people that, you know, like chances are I'll never meet, I'll never go to those places, but on the internet I can see them and I can see what they're writing about and reading about, and how can that impact me? So I really love that global perspective. I wonder what the stats are for MAD PD, how many international presenters they have. I'd love to know. And that's, you know, they're both, Peter Cameron and Derek Rodenizer are both a click away. So, I mean, that's accessible too. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No. I think we left it on the table today. We left it on the table. Yeah, man.
Okay, well, another installment of DeCodEd Podcast is coming to an end. And you know what that reminds me of? The school year's almost over. Isn't that crazy?
Season 3 coming up soon.
Summer school.
Oh, summer school, right.
We have to do summer school remediation.
Yeah.
Enrichment. What is it? Enrichment and remediation?
Yeah. The Alt-Ed model.
Are you done the sketch note for today?
Yeah.
Are you willing to show it or no?
Yeah, I can show it if you want to see it.
So today you just scribbled.
Kinda. But it does say DeCodEd.
I know. I was just joking.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to see how you were going to react to that. Oh, so you just decided to scribble today, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Scribble
Just
noting.
Yeah.
Start writing your book.
There we go, scribble noting. But it's going to be, I'm going to call it alt noting. It's not going to be called scribble noting. I've already got this on the back burner. Alt noting. So dance noting, singing noting, cooking noting. What would be another good one? Rock climbing noting. And skydiving noting. So all these other methods of collecting your knowledge during a presentation. Skydiving noting doesn't work that well, but I'm waiting for the interpretive dance noting to happen at some presentation. Someone just sort of working it at the back. Like, what are you doing? I'm taking notes, yo. I'm kinesthetic.
Okay, I can't say what I want to say on air, so it's going to have to wait for the off-ramp.
All right.
Okay, have a good one.
Chat you soon.
See ya.